Hello, everybody. I'm John Sundberg with Kinetic Data, and this is another in our series of webcasts around digital transformation. Today, we're going to talk about digital transformation and what's important in systems for digital transformation. With me, I have Matt Howe, who oversees all of our client engagements and has experience in tons of our customer projects. I've got James Davies, who oversees all internal workings of Kinetic Data. And then I've got Ben Christenson, who oversees our product development. Got a great set of experiences and skills here on this webinar. We're going to talk about digital transformation. So we're really going to talk about the systems that sort of support and enable digital transformation. We talk about this stuff a lot, like years and years before the digital transformation term even became real popular, et cetera. And I think we kind of distill systems down to a few building blocks that we think underpin this world of digital transformation. And we kind of talk about these building blocks, and we've got sort of four key ones. Forms, which are people interact with forms, and really you're gonna have collections of forms, so those would be a portal. So usually there's a portal that people are interacting with, or vendors, or that kind of thing. Then we also have workflows. So when people do interact with these systems, there's some sort of workflow that's happening that may be purely automated, might be a piece of automation, then go to a human to do some things. All kinds of different participants exist in a workflow. And then lastly, you're stitching systems together with integration. So, that's kind of a high level distilling of what we see for these parts. And I don't know, any just immediate comments on any of that, Matt?
Yeah, well, I think all of those really do come into play, whether you think they do it when you start to think of a process or not. They end up all being kind of key elements in creating any sort of process you want to, whether it's just a single automated tool set. You might want to see a portal to help you visualize activity through that. And you've got the integration to make the systems talk, and you've got the workflow for the actual delivery of the process along the way. So all those play a big piece, whether you kind of initially think it's just the workflow process you're building. They all play a part in all that stuff.
Yeah. And then there's kind of related to all of those pieces is we've been calling them ilities, just sort of obviously a word we made up. Go and find it on let's see, the internet somewhere, see if it already exists. But we've got like visibility, expandability, manageability, scalability, flexibility, those kinds of words. And what we tend to find ends up being maybe one of the key ones is flexibility. So I know, James, you've just been involved in tons of customer engagements where they start off going route A and they might not go route A the whole way. So
yeah, like you were saying, John, there's when you think about digital transformation, what really is that? It's taking manual processes and digitizing them, or call them old school digital processes and bringing them into the 21st century. And when you distill that down, like you were saying, we have forms, portals, workflows, and integrations. And each of those need to be extremely flexible for this to be a digital transformation system. Not a digital transformation, say, tool, but a system that can be used across an organization. So yeah, we see flexibility as being the top ility that's needed within a digital transformation system. Forms, they need to be flexible. You need to be able to lay them out in different ways, maybe conditionally hide and show different pages based on what's going on within your process. So forms need to be ultra flexible. Same with portals. The way that a portal is laid out, the user experience of it, you want a portal that can be extremely flexible and be kind of reworked to meet the business need. Workflows, especially in these low-code platforms, they need to be flexible enough to accommodate what the business's process actually is, instead of reshaping the business to fit into the tool. So we think flexibility is ultra important also in workflows. And then the same in integrations, especially in this digital transformation space, when you might be interacting with a legacy system, let's say, for instance, that doesn't have REST. maybe you can only interact with a database or via a PowerShell script or the command line, let's say. You want to have an integration strategy that's flexible to be able to interact with those different, back-end, call them legacy systems, if you will.
Sure.
And yeah, real quick, I think it goes beyond that even. The legacy or dealing with integrations to complicated to integrate with systems is one, but also sometimes you just have a suite of systems or suite of tools, right? And maybe you're picking the best tool for the job, and because of that, you've got a large number of them, and having something that you can kind of coordinate the handoff between those is a really key part of that kind of automation and kind of transforming your business to try and optimize those things. So you could be using the most up-to-date technologies or the most up-to-date tools, but it's really still important that you kind of coordinate with those.
Sure. Yeah. There's another angle to flexibility, just for the heck of it. I was just thinking of it as we're chatting here, but it's one thing that the tool is flexible, et cetera, but also, quite frankly, the vendor. The vendor needs to be flexible too. And I'm just thinking of, every once in a while we'll have different scenarios that come to us, and there may be a system that somebody wants to stand up that really only has 10 to 20 normal everyday users. And so that licensing for that's pretty obvious, quite frankly. It's like, well, number of users or something sort of well understood, I guess you could say. But then there's also other systems that get sold where, the expansion isn't quite obvious. The number of users aren't quite obvious. People could use it 3 or 4 times, then come back a year from later. So like, how do you license? How do you, prepare for that? That's a whole nother flexibility that's sort of important to pay attention to when picking systems for digital transformation, because most people are going from maybe a manual world where they process things in a certain way, and now when they go digital, they've got all kinds of new things coming at them. So having flexibility from the vendor's side to be able to, I'll say, afford the softwares that you're choosing is also important. Kind of something you figure out later. If you don't pay attention to it at the beginning, it could become a problem.
In a very general sense, digital transformation can be 100 different things to 100 different people. And, just the flexibility to do what are you tackling today versus tomorrow versus next year will be different. Is it an automation? Is it building a whole end user self-serve portal, a fulfillment tool, a single pane of glass to all my applications? All that stuff falls under the digital transformation umbrella. And can your tools and platforms support those types of varied use cases? If you want to be a system, you need to be able to do all that sort of thing.
Ultimately, I think companies are slightly rationalizing systems. So they might have 30, 40 different things that they've done over time, and they had this tool that they may have built internally. They might have this one that's manual, et cetera. And in a way, people want to get down to a relatively small, understandable set that has proven its value, is supportable internally. They have good relationships with the vendor, and then all these other abilities come in, like scalability, et cetera. So I think that flexibility in that your core systems can do a variety of things and not have to buy yet another system or yet another set of tools is a key thing, because over time, I think people will learn more in digital transformation, end up building more and more and more systems. You don't really want to go and buy more and more underpinning systems. So that flexibility allows you to kind of keep a relatively small number of core components. And then I like to say this, heaven forbid you're actually successful. Then what? You're going to start caring about a lot of new things: security, scalability, manageability. All kinds of new things start popping up. Once you actually are successful and start scaling, then you'll start paying attention to other things. And I think security is something that can be a showstopper sometimes, and understanding that early on is of value.
Do you have any examples of that, John?
Well, so oftentimes, typically speaking, most systems have a general tight focus of what they're doing. Maybe it's an IT service management system. So you can stand up a couple of groups that are well-defined for incident management and change management, et cetera. And the system's sort of built around that kind of high-level functioning security, you could say. However, once you get into large organizations, the ability for this system to actually interact with another system, it will have new security rules to it, or they'll have to create whole new, we use the term teams, but collections of people. Maybe you've got people who have gone through certain sets of training, they're allowed to have access to a system, that kind of thing. And just what'll end up being the case is security will be something that can really sort of stop a project. So being able to have flexibility in security models and rules, and being able to enforce them, audit them, et cetera, becomes important. So
Yeah, I think manageability to me, when you're dealing with security, is just as important, if not more important, than the flexibility. If it's really complicated to set up the security rules that you want, right, whether that's user level security or the security for your integrations between those different systems, if that's all hard, then it's really hard to reason about, to gauge whether you're doing things according to recommended practices or not, to audit those things. And so having a system or process, or just being security minded in a way that these practices are very maintainable, monitorable, manageable, is, I think, going to really save people in the long run.
yeah, agreed. And manageability, that's, well, I always describe these systems like this. Like when you start off on a project, you kind of see, like, I kind of make an analogy to climbing a mountain, like, oh, hey, there's the peak. And then once you get to that peak, you now have a whole new visibility. And generally speaking, when people start off on projects related to Kinetic, they think, oh, that's a really nice looking website. Oh, we need to build up a nice website. Okay, so that's fine. So they start building up a new website, and then they go, oh, what we really need is workflow, not exactly a website. So then they're going to restart and do some sort of workflow thing. And then the next thing you know, you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of workflows. And then manageability comes into play. Can we manage thousands? Can we scale, or I should say upgrade many processes, or quite frankly, rationalize them? So being able to manage and distribute the management is a really key thing.
Yeah, that happens
Matt,
in a lot
you
of projects we've had, where customers do come in and say, hey, yeah, we got a small team of people who do that first project, and then get excitement builds, you have more volume to do, and suddenly they have a huge backlog. And then people have to wait for their things. They start to get disenchanted with the application. So being able to push that level of control and usability down by becoming manageable, using those security rules to say, hey, let's expose some of these functions to some lower level staff, which is some minor training. They can get a lot of that stuff done for you, or maybe solve their own challenges, and kind of you're on this framework, and you can actually let other folks kind of enable their own digital transformation in certain areas where the IT, the super skilled folks, are maybe creating elements that then those other teams get to use in their day-to-day operations. So I think that's huge, to give those kind of capabilities to those other staff members, kind of like expand your whole IT footprint for supporting these types of systems.
It's certainly a trend we're seeing in this digital transformation space. It's not wanting to have IT be the bottleneck for building out your processes. Let's say HR needs a system to onboard new vendors, for instance. Being able to do that themselves is very important. So that's where this manageability really comes in. When choosing a digital transformation system that can be used across an organization, you want to be able to distribute the management and effectively make it so that IT, or the system owner, isn't the bottleneck. And it's enabling people closest to the problem to be able to solve their problem in a scalable way.
Yeah, right. And if you think about it from like IT's perspective, they're trained in these concepts of systems and workflows and memory and disk and network and all these like really specific things. That's what they're trained in. And that's probably the space that they should be playing in, is managing that world, which requires training, quite frankly. But then to have a system where you could raise up that level to that subject matter expert, or that person who's close to the problem, and they know their HR issue. And so they can go in and build that HR system. And that's piggybacks on what? Flexibility, security, manageability. All these things are really kind of tying in, because again, I said, heaven forbid you're actually successful and you want to start expanding it across the company. These are all the things that you're going to start paying attention to.
Yeah, right along with manageability, I'm thinking just going into like being able to evolve your processes too, being able to say, hey, clone this, version this, fall back if things don't go well. Those capabilities are make things again more achievable to your other teams out there. And again, those are simple processes to do. Yeah, it's easy for me to clone a process and make my changes. Yep, works great. I'm able to kind of again move things forward faster. And then I like the tools, like the abilities, and that kind of takes these projects and moves them along faster, gaining better results, and again more return on the investment.
Yeah. And that's kind of piggybacking on another one, which is visibility. So being able to toss things into the workflow system to get them done is great. And you want to be able to kind of compartmentalize and let different pieces of the system own its parts. But you want to be able to have some visibility and to coordinate that visibility, because one of the things that will happen in the world of digital transformation is you'll have major component A doing some stuff which is going to interact with major component B. And that is, from a computer science perspective, that is like a complicated scenario. You've got two different log files, two different sets of security, et cetera. But being able to have some sort of lens across your systems so that you can make sense of transactions or just workflows across multiple systems becomes paramount once you start expanding across systems. So that visibility into the different systems is also an important piece. Earlier was mentioned the ability to, I'll say clone, it's a phrase that we use, but like this whole A/B testing, or I think testability and the ability to experiment is also important. I kind of call it sausage grinder development, or go forward. That's a bad plan. When you're looking for a system for digital transformation, you want that concept of cloning and testability. So it's built in. Any comments on that, Ben?
No, other than it's so ingrained in how I look at and approach problems. It's hard to imagine dealing with a system or a set of systems that doesn't support that. Mm-hmm. I think we're all really used to, whether we're using Google Docs or Microsoft Word, that Command Z or the Control Z to undo, right? That's just part of our normal flow. I find myself saying it sometimes when I'm writing on a piece of paper, even just because I'm so mentally used to being able to do that undo. And so having systems that really continue to enable that allows you to be a lot more agile, right? We talked about agility and iteration a little bit in another one of our webcasts, and that same concept of reducing fear, of accelerating your ability to try things, allows you to explore that space and find really low-hanging fruit, or really easy ways to innovate and improve. But when you're handcuffed with that sausage grinder where you can't really try things and you're not able to fall back, or it's just hard to create new things, then you kind of lose out on some of those opportunities. And again, when you're getting the building to those closest to the problems, you want to enable them to be able to try and to solve their problems, because that's going to lead to those best sources of actual improvement.
Yeah. Doing things safely, I think, is important, right along what you said, Ben, and being able to undo, but do them in a way that I can make a change here that does not impact everybody else downstream of me, or I did this whole thing and now the system is broken while I figure out what I even did wrong. So, being able to do things in a what do I want to say, like a sandbox style environment, or somehow it's walled off effectively from other things. I'm only affecting my own stuff, no one else's things, is really important as well.
One of the things that I did early on in my IT career is I worked with different groups that were building software at a large company here in Minnesota. And the whole thing was they would build these different applications and they'd bring them into operations, and they were, quite frankly, unsupportable. They didn't create good log files. They didn't have the ability for processes to start up gracefully, or any of these things. These just things you learn over time, and eventually having supportable systems is a really key thing. So when you're doing digital transformation, you want to consider supportable as part of it. And that brings me back to a couple of other things. Testability. Like I know, like in software development, you do a lot of test-driven development. having that kind of methodology in even your workflow and in your process building is important. I know, James, we spent a lot of time talking about how to improve our processes internally, and making testable code allowed us to run with scissors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can in a very safe way improve your processes if they're testable. If they're not testable, there's just a ton of risk involved in deploying that out to, we'll call it a production environment, and you can't see if it's going to break something.
Right. And I think one thing that comes with testable code is that supportable. So like whoever built it oftentimes is not the group supporting it. And if the support group can go in and run some tests to see if things are functioning as expected, that at least gives the support group something to try, which is a good start. And then maybe over time they build up some documentation for that. But those are kind of some key things. Any other?
I was thinking but expandability, like kind of that integrations layer, really being able to take what you have now and realize over time you want to do more with it, and you need to talk to more systems. And so the ability to kind of say, hey, is it easy to bring those things into the environment, and how can I maintain that integration to the system X? As system X evolves, you're going to have to evolve that integration perhaps as well right along with it, as you stay current and to put those things in place and again do more systems. The benefit of this digital thing is not to replace those existing tools and make them work better. That means those other tools are still going to be there. They're still going to be upgraded and evolved, and maybe new systems come into play. Your transformation system has to be able to do that and play with those. New integrations come out all the time. The old system that was the mainframe now is some sort of new thing you've got to talk to. Got to make sure you can stay current with what's happening, but also kind of live with what you have that exists already in your environment as well.
And piggybacking on that, and one of the things that will happen as you do a digital transformation is most likely you're going to start integrating with companies outside of your space. So this whole thing of integrating with your own, I'll call them tool set, which is under your control, is one world. There's a whole nother world when you're interacting with external customers, partners, etc. And I know, Matt, you've spent a lot of time, we built some tools, Squam being one, but that's a whole new set of issues that come up. And that's real for digital transformation, because it just performing functions in your own company, it expands past that.
It really does. And then you've got to be able to monitor those apps as well. So now you're talking to these other applications. Are they responding to you? Well, who's tracking that? Is your person who developed it watching every process? They can't, right? Your support team has to do it. And then you've got to have somebody else looking at, hey, are the metrics being met that we're expecting this thing to follow through? And all that stuff plays a piece in this. But so yeah, having all four pillars come into play, whether you really expect them to or not, they're all sitting out there as you start to develop these systems and evolve over time. They all play a key part in being able to put that stuff together. But yeah, that integration to other customers or other vendors and customers as well. You're talking to your customer systems, not just your vendors, but all that stuff is on the table, for these sorts of digital transformation systems.
Yeah, for me, one of the big mental shifts that I've had is being a developer, looking at a problem. I've always, or have historically thought, well, I can write a program to solve that. But what we've kind of hit on here over the last little bit is that it's not just solving that problem, right? It's that, can that be maintained over a period of time? Are we doing it, consistently? Do we have good logging? Do we have, all of those things? It's not just about isolating, solving one problem, but it's about a methodology. And to me, digital transformation, looking for a digital transformation system, you really end up getting a lot of bang for your buck, or a lot of benefits that I don't know that I had the vision for early on in my career. And I think that as businesses are looking to transform their business, to become more efficient, to look to embrace the newest technologies, I think that finding a good tool set for them is really important, because it's going to save you a lot of time over the life of your business, that you can just, on things that you just don't even need to think about anymore.
Yeah.
Or that you don't even know to think about ahead of time.
Right.
Absolutely. That's exactly what comes up quite a bit with us. Is generally speaking, like I mentioned earlier, somebody thinks they need a really nice looking website. Oh, hey, we need some workflows. And they may even build that out in open source tools, whatever. which kind of gets you off the ground. That's nice. But then if you actually have a real set of users, real set of business behind it, you're going to start running into things like that agility, scalability, manageability, et cetera. And you could even build all that stuff. You really could. However, it would take a decade to build it versus, evaluating some tools, understanding these needs up front, and then picking the right tools up front. And James, it reminds me of one of the things we ran on early on, which was you may build up a workflow or a process in your digital transformation tool, and that process may take 3 months.
Mhm.
Okay, that's nice. However, maybe at some point we need to change that. Some laws changed. And now we've got a whole new world of process that needs to exist while that old one. So kind of this ability to have versions and multiples running at a time. You want to just highlight what that really means?
Yeah, well, it kind of gets into that, the A/B testing, even like being able to have two versions of the same process being able to run at a time, and it's an outcome of a very flexible digital transformation platform. But also, when we talked a little bit earlier about manageability and how that really plays into selecting or choosing a digital transformation platform. We talked about distributing who can actually build. That also means that the system needs to be low code. Not everyone is a developer, not everyone understands programming languages. So when looking at digital transformation platforms, you really want to make sure that those platforms enable, let's say, developers to build these low code widgets that can then be used throughout the rest of the platform, and then leveraged when, let's say, a compliance issue comes up and we need to change our process. We don't need to get the development team involved again. We can just, whoever's close to that problem, maybe it's the compliance team, can go in there, change that process in a way that that meets their needs.
Yeah, I saw recently an article that was saying that the average Fortune 500 type company or large companies had 450 some custom applications. And that's been, the case in the last, built it up 30 years, 450 some custom applications. And then I saw another article that said in the last say 20 years, X number of applications were built. And they were saying in the next 5 years, twice that will be built again. Right. And so there aren't enough developers in the world to handle the demand, at least I'll call it traditional developers. There isn't enough traditional developers to handle the demand of the process building world. And so being able to enable the person closest to the problem to be able to build up their custom workflow or application or whatever is how the world is going to address that demand. And you know what? Those people are going to know their business problem. It might be an HR problem. It might be, an inventory problem in a warehouse or who knows what. They're close to their problem and they're going to be able to build those specific workflows. But they will not have the computer science brain of understanding scaling or supportability or versionability or all of that stuff. So having that all baked into your digital transformation framework, so to speak, allows you as a company to push that ability to build the right workflows, the right applications to the edge where the people have that knowledge. But yet from a company perspective, you could have legal compliance, you can have the failover that you're going to want if the systems were to tip over. You're going to have all the recovery backups, all that stuff that ends up being important, that end system subject matter expert would never have that knowledge. You've got that baked in your system from day one. That lets people sleep a little bit better and companies grow faster and safer. So anything else to add into tools?
It just becomes a super smart investment by your teams to put those things in place so that you can create these digital transformation. To me, is not a project, it's a start and an end. It's more like we're going to adopt this whole kind of methodology or thought process around using tool sets to kind of streamline our technologies, and it's going to go on forever. And so creating that investment and letting your people use those, give them a little bit of training, a little bit of skills, keep those skills fresh and current, encourage it to go on, and you start this momentum building where you end up being a company who's embracing the new technologies. You're going to be leaps and bounds ahead of your competition because you can evolve rapidly. Your people can solve their problems, and you get to not be stuck on something that eats cycles from your people and dollars from the bottom line. And I think that's really what all these things really are trying to enable and get there. These systems that are kind of meeting all those needs set you up for success long-term in those types of activities.
Yeah. Agreed.
So in summary, it's kind of like when you're looking for a system that will help enable digital transformation, you want to make sure that system has, we'll call them the 4 big building blocks: forms, workflows, so the ability to have processes attached to these forms or actions that happen within a system, be able to integrate with other systems, and then also have portals for users to interact with, I'd say, a collection of forms or processes. And then all of those need to be all of those components need to be agile. They need to provide visibility, be able to be, I would say, manageable is one of the key ones, so that people that understand logic, we'll call them your citizen developers, people that grew up with cell phones and computers and understand basic logic can actually build, while the system underneath the sheets is taking care of and handling the scalability, making sure that security is in place, and ultimately is flexible to meet your business needs.
Yeah, I think that's a great wrap of kind of the 4 pillars and the key things to pay attention to for digital transformation systems. So with that, let's wrap it up, and thanks everybody.
Thanks.
See you next time.